Human rights also apply to Palestinian prisoners. Due to the global focus on COVID-19, a number of concerning human rights violations are being obscured from the public eye. One of these is the conditions that Palestinian prisoners face in Israeli prisons. Numerous human rights organizations, including the European Coalition for Palestinian Prisoners' Rights, have long criticized the inhuman situation in these prisons. Prisoners have often turned, in desperation, to hunger strikes in the hope of pressuring Israeli authorities to improve conditions and of garnering international attention and support. Maher al-Akras, 49, recently announced the suspension of his 103-day hunger strike, following an agreement to release him on November 26. Maher, from a West Bank village near Jenin, was imprisoned on 27 July on the vague grounds that he poses a threat to Israeli security. He has been held under administrative detention, which is incarceration without trial or charge. Such detention can be renewed again and again. Hence, the prisoner never knows when or if he or she will be released. Israel has employed this measure to imprison thousands of Palestinians. Maher has made clear that he is on hunger strike to protest his detention without indictment, trial, evidence or the right to defend himself. Human rights activists emphasize that Israel's usage of administrative detention is a violation of international law. On the 3rd of November, Haaretz published an article entitled "Lawmakers Find Intolerable Conditions in Surprise Visit to Israeli Prison." At Ayalon prison in Ramle, Kahol Lavan lawmaker Miki Haimovich and Moshe Arbel of Shas were shocked to see the conditions the prisoners had to live in. Bed bug infestations, toilets that had just holes in the floor, mildew and water leaks on the walls, and plastic bottles for shower heads. The transfer cells, Haimovich explains, are actually a temporary holding cell both for prisoners who come from the outside during the coronavirus crisis and have to be in isolation, as well as for prisoners who are being transported for hearings between prisons. The sight of those cells is not easy, she said, adding that because the cells are temporary, they are in the worst state of all. Quote, "Prisoners are supposed to have 2 coronavirus tests over 2 weeks, but in practice this is often delayed, which means that they stay in these cells for longer." So Haimovich. The situation is even more horrible in the separation cells for prisoners who have committed disciplinary infractions. This is a means of punishment, but the cells are not fit for human habitation. Even in the regular cells, where prisoners spend years, the complaint of bed bugs is persistent. Haimovich. Quote, "The grim scenes we saw on our surprise visit to the Ayalon prison and in the transfer section are still burnt into my memory," said Arbel. He noted that the state controller had already demanded that the situation be addressed, but this has not yet happened. Arbel said he would take up the issue with the chairman of the Knesset Interior Committee. "We can only hope that the visit of these 2 MPs will have some consequences and will lead to better conditions for the prisoners." According to Yoni Jaraf, a former prisoner who is now leading a fight against the Israeli prison service, quote, "Human rights are being trampled in the prisons today. The medical system, which is not supervised by the health ministry, is operating with no oversight at all," unquote. The cells are severely overcrowded, terribly hot, there's no air conditioning and there are bed bugs everywhere, Yahab said. Quote, "The tension and the violence are growing. You can only imagine what happens in a heat wave or cold snap when there are no family visits due to coronavirus restrictions, unquote. Another outrage is the unlawful collective punishment of the families of Palestinians accused of being involved in acts of resistance against the occupation army or settlers. On the 1st of November, for example, Israeli occupation forces demolished Mohammed Dwight's family home in Rujayb in the northern West Bank. Dwight is currently in an Israeli prison for alleged involvement in a stabbing attack in Israel. According to the Palestinian Center for Human Rights, the IOF, accompanied by